2024 business meeting of the Richmond Community Schools Board of Trustees. You can please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We can have the reading of the mission statement, please.
Richmond Community Schools guides students on pathways of learning to the future of limitless possibilities.
And the reading of the vision statement, please.
Richmond Community Schools, a collaborative community nurturing mind, body, and spirit to prepare students for lives of choice, purpose, and service.
Thank you. First item will be celebrations. Dr. Wright.
President Brunt and trustees, I'm going to ask that Mrs. Bridget Hazel Baker join us at the podium to introduce this evening's celebratory individuals. Team. Mean face to Mr. Jones.
How are you guys doing? We are going to be bringing up Brad Walton up here for us. He's going to come and explain who we have as our visitors tonight. So it was really fun to walk in earlier and see all the faces. So we had a little mini reusing it of some people here. So Mr. Walton, is that please?
Dr. Wright, members of cabinet, members of the board. I swear, I was getting out of board meetings. This is okay. All right.
Would you please state your name?
Brad Walton, 1997 graduate, your first year on the board.
Oh,
So, true. Yeah, yes. Every chance I get, I will point that out. All right. Who I've got with us today is just a fraction of the people we have on our staff and our ESE, our environmental services department. Without them, without our maintenance department, this place doesn't run. You wouldn't want it to run. How's that? These guys are the behind the scenes people that are not in it for the more. They are just to make things work, and they love it. And they will drop anything, do anything for you at just a moment's notice. The thing I've been blessed with in this role and almost taken back by is just the willingness of the team members we have. There's nothing they won't do if you ask them. We got some very new faces, and we've got some wily veterans that are like Farmers Insurance. They know a thing or two because they've seen a thing or two. All right. So with us, we've got Marvin Rowe. He's an ESE 1 test, and he started back in 1990 at RHS and went to Dennis, and now he is the head custodian at Test. How long have you been at Test? 30 years. Okay. Next we have Tracy Cheshner. She started shortly after him in 1993. Food service, moved to the custodial department in 1997, and she's been in almost every building we have, and she's currently in Westview as our ES1. Next, we have Adam Spalding, and I'm dating myself here. I actually had Adam in class. He's our ESE1 at Fairview. He started back in 2017 at RHS, and then moved to our ESE1 at Fairview. And then got Don Kaufman, who started here just over a year ago. Almost exactly a year, right? Yeah, he's our ESE1 over at Vail. People who couldn't be here tonight are Tommy Skaggs. He's our ESE1 over at Dennis. He started in 2002. Helen Gibson, she is our second shift ESE1 over at the high school. She started in 2014. Gary Tabor is our ESE1 at Star. He started back at the high school in 2018 and then moved to Star, I think, 3 years ago. Jessica Moon, you guys, the central office have grown to love her. She started the same month as I did here in 2024. Tom McNally is our supervisor of the custodial unit over at RHS. He started as a Class 2 intern center in 2015 and moved into that role that he's currently in, I think, 3 years ago. And then Jason Brock, he's an ESE1 at Terranus Center. He's got a cool story. He started as a Class 2 at Terranus Center in 2019. 10 days later, he was promoted to the ESE1 there because the ESE1 resigned. So he was thrown to the wolves, and he has hit a home run. He's done great. Lisa Turner is our ESE1 over Baxter. She started in 2018. Todd Mann, another one of our Wiley veterans. He's at Hibbard. He started back in August 1998. Eugene Crawford. We can't get rid of the guy. He started in 1995, retired in 2003, and 6 months later returned back, and he's our ESE1 at Charles. And he's a great person, great guy. Jeremy Reese in our third shift, ESE1 at the high school. He's started in 2002. Another Wiley veteran is Lori Schwab. She is our ESE1 at Crestdale. She started back in 1989 at the high school. Then was an ESE1 at Garrison. And then now she's back up at Crestdale. And taking the cake with longevity is Joy Turner. She's our assistant supervisor over at RHS and in charge of Civic Hall. She started back in 1979. Worked here for 3 years, left and came back in 1989, and has been here ever since. So, wanted to put some faces with the names here and give you guys the faces of who make things run. One of the first things I've learned as a teacher, you keep your secretaries happy and you keep your custodians happy, and they will make your life great. And nothing can be said anymore. Like I said earlier, these guys will do anything for anybody if they ask. And they're very selfless in their job and very dedicated to what they do. So, any questions? Comments?
Just thank you very much. We appreciate each and every one of you. I know Tracy because I started teaching a few years after her and traveled around quite a bit and ended my career. Tracy was at Hibbard, an important part of classroom teachers. Things running smoothly for students is, environmental services team. So thank you.
I would certainly hope that somehow we get their faces and names on the site as a part of the celebration. When we go into schools, we recognize the teachers. We walk to their rooms, we see them out and about. But realistically, you're the unsung heroes. And sometimes we walk past you, or sometimes we don't see you because you're diligently doing your job and you're not necessarily in a classroom. That doesn't say, though, that we really appreciate what you're doing, especially with the longevity and even just being here for a year. Thank you very much, because you make our buildings very much safe and worth coming into. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, before you all sit down, we'll take photographs of you all mine.
I will.
Thank you.
Next, we have public commentary. Cindy, do we have anyone signed up? We do. We have one person. Great. Kristen Jones. I'll read our statement here. For those who wish to comment this evening's board meeting, the maximum time to speak is 5 minutes. Please keep your comments fact-based and within the time permitted. Comments are not to be personally directed or abusive. Comments recognizing the work of staff and students are always welcome. However, critical remarks concerning specific school personnel or students are to be made through the complaint process available in policy 9130. School board members do not respond to public comments during the meeting, but you will receive a personal follow-up email from myself, the board president. Please state your name and address before speaking.
Kristen Jones.
Do you need my address too?
Okay. All right. Hello, my name is Kristen Jones, and I'm an ELL teacher at Star and Charles. Normally, I stand before you and ask for more support for the ELL department or celebrate our hardworking instructional interpreters, but tonight's very different. Tonight, I'd like to take a moment to celebrate the life of star paraprofessional Steve Michael, who passed away unexpectedly this week. Steve was a lifelong resident of Richmond and attended Star Elementary and Test Junior High School. He was a 1968 graduate of Richmond High School, and he received his Bachelor of Science degree from Ivy Tech. Steve was also an Air Force veteran who proudly served our country in Vietnam. Steve chose to come back to Richmond Community Schools and work as an exceptional education paraprofessional at Star for years. To say that he touched many lives is an understatement. When I was a classroom teacher, Steve worked in my room, and I came to rely on his unwavering support and dedication to our students. He always had a way of reaching students who were having a difficult moment. And to be honest, he helped lift me up on more than one occasion when I was doubting my abilities as a teacher. Steve was always ready with a smile, a kind word of encouragement, or a perfectly timed joke. One colleague posted this on Facebook, and the sentiment is everything that our Star family is feeling during this time. Steve touched so many lives, always a kind word, never anger towards students or adults. He adored his wife and cared for his family, including his school family. His impact and contributions to our community and school continue. We will miss his physical presence, but his presence lives on in us. Star lost an amazing colleague and friend last week. We are all truly blessed to have known him. And I thank you for letting me take a moment to publicly honor Steve Michael and his dedication to RCS, and most importantly, his dedication to the students and staff at Star Elementary.
Okay, we will move on to consent items.
I'd like to make a motion, we remove 3 of the HR consent items that deal with the athletics. We've asked for a budget for the athletics department for quite some time. There's been some realignment there, some changes made to meet budget, and those are the co-sports information director positions and the extra duty, and then the contract amendment for the person of 225 to 260 days until we get a full budget and a plan on their expenses through the athletics.
We have a motion on the table.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion by member Zaleski to table those 3 items and a second by member Weber. Questions or comments? I guess I have questions. Stacy, can you tell us about these positions or about these positions from the past, or the new positions, or give us some background information, please?
The so the 260 moving the administrative assistant or the assistant from 225 to 260. There's a need during the summer. That's an opportunity for the assistant to help in scheduling and getting buses and doing a lot of that paperwork, and that's where a lot of our hires happen. And so that person submits the flow charts on behalf of the athletic director. So that's where that's coming from. As far as the 2 sports information directors, correct. They are that was a stipend that the board approved was a year ago last spring, and that is a split. They're splitting that up between 2 people, so that as we know currently, there's not a lot of publication of the success of our athletes. That's not, you used to be able to open up the Plate MI and find out what the score was. Now it's difficult to get those scores. It's difficult to get information on our athletes. It's difficult to see their success. And so this is an opportunity to be able to have a venue where we can share the success of our athletes and our teams.
And just to contribute if I can, of what Mr. Miles has alluded to, the conversation to extend the there within the athletic office that secretary that was a conversation that had been had for some time. However, this past summer, not having an athletic director in place, it would carry me even that much more evidence that such a decision would be of necessity and allow for more efficient and effective processing. As far as these co-sport information directors, Mr. Miles, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was last spring that the decision was made to split the stipend into two, and the half of that stipend is going to the recently hired radio and TV teacher, so as to, as you mentioned, highlight athletics. And I know there's some ideas as to broadcasting some of our athletic events through not only our own forum, but also forums around the city. I know WCTV has worked with schools in and around the county. And then the other half was the decision at that point was that it would fall in the same realm that it had fallen into previously, which is more in the athletic administrative office sense. If I'm not mistaken, I believe Mr. Miles, that was the rationale for splitting that.
Correct.
And was our new athletic director a part of the conversations of these new hires or these positions, or?
He was involved in, well, he did have a say in the movement to the 260. Felt like that'd be beneficial to him. I believe the one of the splits was actually performed by him. The other one, I think, was prior to that.
Okay, and we approved the money, so the money's sitting, or the money, we've approved spending money on this, and now is the time when you're coming in and saying, here are the positions. Have we filled these positions before, or this is the first time that we?
This is the first time that we're filled.
Okay.
As far as the co-director's role, we have filled that role before, but it's been one person.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Yes.
Oh,
It's the
okay,
first
so
time
now
it's been
it's
split.
just splitting.
Yes.
Okay.
In the past, it's been one person who's held the position. I'm saying Jeremy Hill.
Yeah, I believe this was 2022 when 2023 when we first created that position.
Okay, and it's been filled until then, and now we have two new people that are kind of like, they're taking this spot. Okay, I'm just trying to wrap my head around it.
They just split the stipend, so I was just having this stipend.
Wasn't there discussion last year, the person that held the sports information moved on to another school, and the time was reallocating those funds to make his budget feasible and not refilling that sports information? Almost positive.
I'm not understanding this.
That person that had the sports information left. The previous athletic director chose not to fill it to make his budget.
I don't know about that. I can't recall that. I can do some checking on that, but I don't recall that part.
I do know that we did get a review of the athletic department with the financial summaries on June the 10th, 2024 from our former athletic director. I know that it via email, I couldn't find it today, but it wasn't detailed. It was a summary of money spent for the last several years and how money in the budget amount, but it wasn't a breakdown of that. I still would like to see the breakdown. I knew our new athletic director is probably getting acquainted with things.
As he's assessing the current landscape, the other caveat is that with our new director of finance, some of the retooling of our central office, that is a high priority, is to make sure that coming out of our finance department, not only the athletic budget, but also other budgetary information that, as I understand, has been of success in past practice. So we're going to try to return back to those successful practice. Budgetary report inside of the state.
Well, going back to Member Selesky's, one of his concerns in regards to the requests that have been made for the last couple of years in regards to seeing a breakdown of the athletic department's budget. I'm in agreement with him. Want to see that? It's a different type of situation right now because the current athletic director that we have is in a position for 5 weeks, maybe 5 weeks. But, and I understand there's growing pains of it, and he came in at a time when we're just 5 weeks short of school. A number of athletic programs are already underway, and all the things that go along with that. Still, I would like to mirror that sometime down the road as soon as possible when he gets settled in to see the breakdown of the budget. I do recall, if I may, the splitting of the position and the rationale behind it. To an extent, I do get it. The needs, maybe it's even more necessity now with a new athletic director than what it was, a year ago. So it's just my thought, but I do want to hold fast on, we would like to see a budget.
There's been a number of changes last couple of years, particularly as middle school AD was a position may have been budgeted, but I don't recall ever having one or a full-time one. I think we have a half-time conditioning coach now. I'm not sure where that falls in the AD's budget. And so I think, yeah, we've asked, and I think it's a good conversation, and I think I'd like to see, because I think we tend to just keep adding, and I just want to make sure we're prioritizing what we're spending and getting what exactly we want.
What would be a reasonable timeline for us to expect that from Mr. Lee?
In conjunction with our finance department, of course.
So, and I know that Melissa's already started working on some of this and we've been talking about it, but the annual financial report is due this month. So this month would be really hard to get this, knowing that Mr. Lee has a lot he's trying to figure out, making sure schedules are done and transportation is ordered and kids are where they need to be. I would think that we could work on this throughout, September, make sure we have it to you by the end, by the second meeting in September. Does that sound reasonable?
By fall break.
Fall break
Yeah,
would be
fall break.
even better. That would give us a good amount of time to make sure.
That way we're not having this conversation again.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
next time we have consent items and like, wait a minute, we still know.
We can get that for you.
Just for a point of clarity, at this juncture, we're confident from a budgetary standpoint that what we're recommending we cover. Sure.
Yeah, so as far as, what Mr. Mops alluded to, this is not a change in amount. They're just dividing the stipend. So rather than it being one person, it's just going to be two. So these positions existed prior to last year. It's not a change from what we've done in the past. It's just that they're dividing it. Sometimes that happens in coaching staff when somebody needs, they can't be there every time. So they'll get two coaches instead of one and they'll split it. That's not abnormal at all. And this is one of those instances where it works out to meet the need. So they decided
And that,
that
I understand that, and I
Yeah.
think probably, well, I don't want to speak for anyone else, I understand that, but I do understand also that we have wanted to be cognizant as to what the financial situation is with the athletic department, and so we're kind of like, all right, let's get that.
I also
Full
ask,
break, sounds good.
for a point of clarity, Mr. Miles, if this is the current motion that's on the table and seconded, if it is voted to be tabled, does that then therefore prevent Mr. Bentley, I'm sorry, those that we have on the HR, does that prevent them from being able to carry out those particular duties along with the 260 contract that then retreat back into 25 until the board approves? Is that what I understand?
Yes.
And of the July 18th effective date as mentioned, that's, I'm not saying during that good faith period in which as superintendent,
Right.
The board approves me or authorizes me to make different hires, those summer hires. Yeah. So I just want, so ideally all of that sheets holds until we come back with a
Yes.
from a board.
Yes. That's the way it works.
I did just forward to the board the email that we got at the athletic department with the financial summary on June the 10th. It's a very beginning. We need to see the details 100%. But this is good to go back and kind of review kind of what was presented or sent to us, I should say.
And thanks for letting us know when to expect the real one fleshed out. Yeah.
Are we-
Just to close, that is definitely one of the things that I know in speaking with Mr. Swafford, speaking with HR, speaking with our team, we've heard it, and that's one of the things we want to do is provide such fiscal reports so that you all are well informed and have it over for you as we are again retooling and restructuring our proposed practices guidelines. Those things are to come for sure.
I have two questions. One, are we able to sort of get a fall sport org chart? Sort of like with,
It's a fall sport.
org chart
Oh,
with like coaches. Obviously it's hard to kind of put one together with those two co-athletic directors, sort of that, detail on the higher level, kind of, I don't want to call them office employees, non-coaches that we have. And then sort of the number of coaches for each fall sport just before September, just to kind of see, to get our eyes on that amount. I've noticed too, and I don't want to get too off topic from this piece of, who's a volunteer coach versus who are we paying extra duty? Because I think that plays into the budget conversation of, I've seen some sports already this fall where they might have had 2 coaches last year. Now they might have 4. Or
Once again, I'm sorry. The bargain contract tells you how many positions there are for each sport, and then they can split that. So a lot of times, for example, they might have 2 positions as an assistant coach for X amount of dollars, and what they might do is find 3 people, and they're all willing to take 2/3 of that, and then split the money that way too. So that would kind of, if we said there were so many coaches in football, you might think, are they all getting paid what the contract says? Well, that's not really the case.
Right.
They've just taken that money and kind of split it up.
Yeah.
And that's for the head coach to
okay,
kind of
do we have access to that?
to the contract. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's under the HR page. I'll send you the
Okay.
link then.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Would you restate the motion?
Sure. The motion is on the table from Zaleski, a second from Weber, to take 3 HR items and to table them. And those 3 HR items are the sports information. I don't have the title.
The 2
Exactly.
co-sports
Thank you.
information directors under extra
Co-sport
duty.
Director, yes. And the movement from the number of days worked with the, thank you, athletic department secretary. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Nay. Okay, I'm gonna do a roll call. Nicole Stoltz.
Nay.
Zaleski.
Aye.
Weber.
Nay.
Brand.
Aye.
Broughton. Nay. Stevens.
Nay.
Pickering.
Aye.
Vote is denied, 4-3. So we'll go back to our consent items. Looking for a motion, a new motion, I guess.
I move that we accept the consent items as presented. We need to spell it.
I have a motion from Stoltz to approve the consent items along with the addendum as presented.
Second.
Second from Stevens. And questions and discussion.
I have one question. This kind of goes along with my before question. Can we assume if there's a coach and they're volunteer, they wouldn't be on the HR consent items? Or are all,
If they're not if they're volunteer, they wouldn't be on.
Okay.
These are all paid positions.
okay, got it, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I just appreciate the conversation earlier. I think Pete's point that athletic budget is, I've never seen one in my 8 years on the board, so I would really enjoy it.
It sounds like we will before fall break. Excellent. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Roll call. Stoltz. Aye. Zaleski.
Nay.
Weber.
Aye.
Brand.
Nay.
Brunton. Aye. Stevens.
Aye.
Pickering.
Aye.
Vote passes 3-2. Oh, sorry, 5. I wrote 5. 5-2. Sorry. Okay. Next, action items. 6.01, food services a la carte pricing as presented.
I move to approve 6.01 action item food services also pricing as presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion by member Stevens, a second by member Stoltz. Questions and comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. Next is item 6.02, the 24-25 mental health agreement with Centerstone as presented.
Move for approval.
I'll second.
I have a motion by member Zaleski, a second by member Stoltz. Questions and comments?
I have a question. Reading it, is it correct that a Centerstone will only see Centerstone patients? Right?
Correct.
Because basically, if they're established, and I'm assuming that is sort of like going to the doctor and insurance and everything would play into that. Is that sort of okay? So, what if you're not a Centerstone patient? Do they flow to Meridian for the same type of service?
For service, they will
Okay.
be referred to Meridian if our internal services believe that is the best route. Of course, as we know, the first is our amazing class speakers that address the matter. They did at that point for such case if necessary to the counseling department, counseling administration, then either to Meridian or if they are caseholder.
Okay. Is there ever a situation where a student may, in this process, become a patient of Centerstone? Like,
Yes.
they could be referred to them and
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And referred and also accepted if
Okay.
criteria is met. They don't see us side.
Okay.
Also, what we have come to understand with Meridian Health and Centerstone and all of our other partners, they all play well and stand together. And so for those students that are being received by Meridian, they've been asked, said student, have you already previously been working with anyone? That student then says, well, I do have a Centerstone liaison. Yeah.
Okay.
But students will receive such services and such care. Most have been passed to some of these.
Okay. So there won't be students who need services that don't have to someone who can help them.
Absolutely, yeah. If a student needs such services, we will be able to follow those students to said services.
And the MOU with Meridian already covers those needs as it's already written.
As it's already written, yes. Yes, sir. Yeah, I know that was one of the questions when Meridian first came on a few years back. And they had been at a quasi level, if you will, providing said services. And again, I think what's important to understand is that there's different tiers and levels of service. And I know that we have 3 amazing Centerstone agents with us that could further elaborate on the matter, but Centerstone provides a particular level and tier of service. Meridian provides another, but no matter whatever the student needs, they will be served and pointed in the right direction. And based on what Ms. Pickering had asked, as far as meeting particular criteria and find where families' medical options are, or if they don't have options, then there are other safety nets, fiscal and medical safety nets to cover costs. But We are doing a tremendous job of, that's one of my visionary perspectives, social emotional support, that falls behind quality tier one instruction and systemic alignment. What it is that Centerstone has provided our corporation for so many years, what it is really this company provide along with our internal support staff, our students.
I want to say I appreciate the lengths that we're going to make sure that mental health issues are being handled properly, that we are giving multi-level supports. I just think that mental health's a major concern right now with a lot of our students and a lot of our families. And so I thank you that RCS is doing a lot to provide all that support. So
we definitely thank our partners.
Yes.
They go above and beyond.
Any other questions, comments?
I think it's worth mentioning, both with Centerstone and Meridian, they're now providing these services without extra cost to RCS. It's we're providing a space, but as far as budgetary costs, they're providing them as a zero budget hit to RCS. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Other questions, comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. 6.03, conflict of interest. This is an updated conflict of interest form for Member Selesky.
I move to approve the conflict of interest. 6.03.
I'll second that.
A motion by Member Stevens, a second by Member Stoltz. Questions or comments?
Comment. Just reading the legality of it. Not you. The document itself. It's obviously outdated. It's outdated, I would believe, because Indiana no longer goes to classes on felony. It's levels.
Sounds like we'll need to review this document, update it.
About point 2 of the page there, at the top, reference class D value.
Yes, sir. We went away from classes of felonies a number of years ago.
6 years ago.
At least that.
And this is just an updated form since my brother is on the help me run the building RCS build.
Richmond Community Schools Multi
Yes.
School Building Corporation.
Thank you.
Easy for me to say.
Thank you. So just spirit of transparency, wanted to make sure that.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that it's not being required in this context, but in the sense that this is not being under the criminal conflict of interest statute. However, I've never dissuaded board members from advising well beyond what the law requires, just for the sake of transparency and avoiding appearances of impropriety. So if it looks like we're over disclosing, we always have, and that's been a tradition that I think, unless the board feels otherwise, I don't see any reason to change.
Other questions or comments? All those, will you be abstaining?
I don't think I'll need to abstain.
Okay. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. Next, item 6.04, the 24-25 fire and rescue course MOU as presented.
I move to go ahead.
I move that we accept item 6.04, the 2024-2025 Fire and Rescue Course MOU.
Second.
I have a motion from Member Stoltz, a second from Member Stevens. Questions and or comments?
As a police officer, I'm very jealous that we do not offer the same thing, but age limits stand in the way of that. But I can tell you for a fact, the city of Richmond and the Richmond Fire Department in particular have benefited greatly over the last number of years with this program. I think it's a true gem that we have to offer it because it does bring in students from elsewhere who ultimately become members of the Richmond Fire Department. So,
Other questions or comments regarding MOU?
I guess a comment, just a friend of mine, did this program and has, been, transitioned into serving our community in this way. And I feel like that's what we should be about is, transitioning our students into serving in the community. And so this is a perfect segue for that. So that's it.
Other questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. Next, under action items, item 6.05, revised cash tuition rates for out-of-state students as presented.
Move that we accept the revised cash tuition rates for out-of-state students as presented.
I will second.
I have a motion by member Stoltz and a second by member Stevens. Questions or comments?
I did have one comment. It's just sort of would be helpful in the notes when we have like a revision, just like, hey, this was what it was, but it's actually this. Just as a,
It's a good idea.
because
A
sometimes, I think this one was just the last meeting, but they just run together. And I was like, I have no capacity to go back and look. Not that it's a big deal. It's just a little helpful, like quick.
In the notes and the
Or like the executive
Board
content.
docs.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
The administrative content. Good
yeah,
suggestion.
yeah. Because I think sometimes that happens with like rebids or, if there's a addendum or something changes on operations, you'll put in sort of,
Right.
it's just,
drop it in there.
yeah, it's just a little helpful.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. Next, we are at policy review and updates. Before we start looking at these, I want to just recap our decision and discussion from our last board meeting, which was we're going to work through policies in a combination. We suggested a work sessions maybe, which we have not gotten to clearly because we had some pressing facility matters that we still are going to have. And also work through them in business meetings, which is what the hope is this evening that we're going to do. And I mean, clearly we can advise if that's how, but the last board meeting, that's kind of what we came to, a decision, a combination to do with policy. So this portion of the meeting should be where we are discussing, do we want to move it to second reading? Is it going to be the 10th reading? It doesn't have to stop somewhere. We have to feel comfortable with the language in this discussion. I think in the past, we were kind of used to it being quicker, and this should really be a full discussion because this is the time to look at these. And the thought is, Stacy brought these because they were pressing or they were ones that needed further discussion. So every week, I'm assuming Stacy will choose ones that are either ones that he knows they're right now, we got to get this, or this one, was on that list of ones that we really need to have deep conversations about. So just a reminder.
Or if we feel like,
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes.
like this is something we want to address right now.
And also from a cabinet standpoint, whether it be curriculum instruction, the operations, we also, in coordination with Mr. Mouse, come across things as we go day to day. If I could also just add a reminder that, as I know it was mentioned during the last meeting, the format and the context that you're seeing, whether you're looking at hard copies or digitally, during our working groups, when we had sat down last year, Member Stevens, Member Pickering, myself, Member Mops, and others, this was the format in which we would trickle through and highlight and make decisions. But I know that to on this point, it was decided, the board decided that it was going to be in this form that we would carry out such a process to afford everyone an opportunity to engage and also receive the information in real time.
So when we see these are things that we are discussing now and making decisions on. Does the X want to be there? Do we want to keep the words or move the words? This is our time for discussion and decision on whether we want to move it on to second reading or where we want to be at these.
But it is not in its final form. This is
And President Brun. So the ones that are are being brought tonight actually were updates from the last legislative session. And so as you see, the green are what was added, and the pink are what was stricken from before. So sometimes it's just a verbiage change, and so at least the first two, I believe, were from that.
Thank you.
So how does that work as far as so say we get into 7.01 and we're hashing it out and decide, you know what, we still want to table this. We could just table it instead of moving it to second reading. Is that correct? Or do we move it to second reading to hash it out?
I would think we
I mean,
move
is that
it just so that we know, oh, we have talked about this, but it doesn't mean that then it's gonna be a final, because it could be,
I'm just
I don't know.
I want to see how good I am before Attorney Cross answers, but I believe we would, let's see, I believe we would move to second reading because, and I've heard Attorney Cross reference this before, and I think you just referenced it, it can go to third reading, fourth
Okay,
reading,
that's-
fifth reading.
Or
Until
just
it's
like
so
final action regardless of however, whether you want to add accountable readings or not. I mean, I think until you get it the way you want it, you don't have to adopt it.
There'd be a vote
just
to
making
move
sure.
it forward, and that could fail or pass.
That's a procedural aspect as opposed to substance. Yeah.
Okay.
Approving on first
And if
reading.
it fails, it would stay at like first reading.
So if we're not happy
It would
with
stay
discussion,
as
we
is.
just put
Yes,
it
it
down.
would, yes,
And it
yeah,
would
it would
stay.
stay,
Because
it's
it's
never
never-
had any changes.
But would we bring it? Okay.
I
And
mean, I
any-
guess
If
it
we
would
would do that, we
come
would
back.
just be done with it. Or what is it?
Now then it would come back.
Okay.
Bang.
To me, if it failed the first reading, then that means we don't want to look at it for a while. But if it goes on to second, meaning we're still working it, right?
And any changes you suggest, we can make those changes and bring it back for the second.
Right.
I will
If
say
it fails, it doesn't move forward.
Right.
On this particular policy,
Are you looking at the first one? Yeah.
I'm looking at the,
You're moving too
Drug free?
fast for me.
Sorry.
Okay, yes. So let's start by looking at
But before we
policies. Yes.
finish Kristen's conversation, so I still have a question. There's a stack of policies that were all identified by board members as needing additional input. What's the plan for those?
What I just stated is that we're gonna have we need to have a work session, so we need to decide if we want facilities for the next one or, so I think what we decided last meeting was a work session, using the right terminology, and they would start filtering in, Mr. Mops would start filtering it in so that we can have these discussions and start moving them forward. Is the board still in agreement on that's how they should be handled? It's really up to us. I felt like that's what we kind of decided on last time. That's why I wanted to recap to make sure we're all on the same page. Do you feel like it should be handled a different way, John?
Well, that's not my preference, but if it's the
Okay.
board's preference, then that so be it.
Well, I think it's an open discussion on how we, do you know, Stacy, how many policies there were? I mean, I remember the spreadsheet
There
where
were
we
quite a
added.
few. You know,
I'm-
4 maybe, I mean, every bunch. And some were super simple, but some were complex.
So if we have 3 a meeting, 2 meetings a month, we're looking at 6.
We would
And so
probably,
maybe the work session, after we kind of work through facilities, we could grab a bulk number of them and work through, or
I
some of them.
think some could be, like, you could get through 10.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
to Mr. Weber's point, that there may be some that will run through faster than others, and so.
I think some were 2 options, right? Like 2
Okay.
check marks.
Yes.
And then obviously some, which Mr. Mops did a good job of trying to, if we had a couple big ones, but we would just do it.
Went wrong, but there's also some that Neola added that I don't think we need. And I think,
And I think those
There's
will be
no-
part of discussion when
there's
they
no
come before
state
us.
statutes referenced, they came in that big Neola packet and we said we approved everything. And
Right.
so I think those need to be looked at and eliminated.
And so when they come forward, I think that would be a great time to do that. And so, Mr. Mobs, I'm wondering if maybe you could bring to us, so we have more than 3, maybe a couple that are really, like Mrs. Pickering noted, that they are just quick ones that maybe we won't have as much discussion on. And then we could, not drag these on.
And I think at some point we have to, do we stay with Neola?
Right,
I
that's
think that conversation, I don't know when that contract comes up, but
And-
have that.
Mr. Mops, would you be able to send us an email and let us know when that contract is up with Neola so that we can
Yes.
have that in mind and then have that discussion ahead of time? Okay. If we can go ahead and look at policy 7.01, this is the first reading of 1422.01, the drug-free workplace.
Move to second reading. I'll second.
And a motion from Zaleski to move to second reading and a second by Stevens. Questions or comments?
I will be addressing this with the rest of the body at the state, Indiana State School Boards Association next month on some vague issues in here. And I will go back to an employee who reports for duty or attends a corporation sponsored function after using a controlled substance or in particular in this situation consuming alcohol is in violation of this prohibition. And I've already forwarded this so they know that I'll be addressing this in the body next month. It's vague right there, and I'm concerned about how vague it is, or consuming alcohol in violation of this. So earlier in it, it talks about attending either school or a school function. So the subject comes home from work. They have dinner, they have a glass of wine. 2 hours later, they attend the basketball game, a school function. Somebody who doesn't like them say, I saw them drinking wine. Is that a violation of this policy?
That's the same question I had here.
So that needs to be addressed. That needs to be addressed. We'll be bringing that to the body, state level next month. So
Is that something you feel like we need to make a change to this now?
we
or-
can't.
Okay,
I
okay.
mean, we always can, but we would create a different stipulation
Then
in
what's
addition to
required.
what we have here. But that's going to be a broader discussion. That's going to require some legal thought, because then you get into the, okay, who's going to test the person or whatever. So
So are you suggesting we move forward with it as it's
I-
presented? and we
yes,
may have
because
to look back on it when that.
I suggest we move forward with it. That's why I seconded it. But
Yes.
however, that's going to be a broader conversation, not just on the local level, but for statewide.
No, thank you.
Didn't we talk about, last year, and this year, about alcohol served, like in the cafeteria? I forget, was that for the art museum? Or maybe it was at the art museum?
Right.
Just, right, if with this policy, no one could have a glass of wine if you're a school employee? Right, is that?
That's why
That's why it's problematic.
Right.
So how do we- Ron, any ideas how to get us out of that?
I would say read the enabling statutes and see if you need to add them. You got the drug-free workplace, Drug-Free Schools and Communities Act, 20 USC 3224, 41 USC 701. Attempts to expand on what you have to have are problematic because they're unknown. Sometimes less said the better.
Or is art museum, I guess technically not school sponsored function, right? Is that a line that you can draw?
that is some school property.
Does it say school property or does it say school function? School sponsored.
Well, regardless, even if it's, in the cafeteria or anywhere else in the school, say you're having your 30th reunion and, wine's being served and you happen to be a school employee.
Didn't think about that.
And
Right, they can't drink.
therefore, all of a sudden you can't have a glass of wine at your reunion,
I'm not trying to.
That's not, I feel like that's not the spirit of this law,
No,
so to speak,
no.
this policy. So can we strike that portion in order to, could we
Well,
just remove an employee?
There may be other issues to talk about, but I mean, I think you're gonna take it under second readings and that's when everybody gets their shot at it if they wanna have a proposal to strike something or add something.
Okay, so we don't strike it now, we just tell Stacy we're thinking we'd
Well,
like to strike it. Could we-
Strike it and still move it to second
Recommend
reading
it.
as stricken. I mean, that would be okay. I don't know if there's or not.
So Stacy, can you bring it back to second reading where there's some changes that can accommodate for this instances that Ken mentioned?
I think the way it works best is it put the onus on the board members who have concerns to contact Stacy.
Okay,
And then
Okay.
when he starts getting multiple concerns of the same thing or inconsistent ones, then that's going to be the event of further board conversation.
okay.
And I don't necessarily have concerns. I just feel like there's got to be a line. It's either no alcohol or some sort of. But maybe Aaron, whatever you.
Well, again, it's not just here locally, but any other corporation that adopts this policy, Neola, is facing the same type of thing. And I mean, it's open. Every circumstance, or excuse me, every incident is subject to being questioned because of how vague it is, because it really doesn't spell out or define certain legal issues. So, you know, I have no problem with moving it to second, and I will certainly be contacting Mr. Moss, but I'm speaking for a group of a number of other board members from around the state in regards to this specific issue.
Particularly when you have a policy that allows alcohol to be used on school turtle.
No, I mean, devil's advocate over here. I'm also, I mean, I don't want our employees showing up drunk to the games, you know, so I do think we need something.
But that's
So-
hard, right? Because yeah, you go to dinner.
What's
So
that?
you go to dinner.
Right, dinner's
you go
one
to a
thing,
game,
right,
But then you go to a game.
right.
Maybe you had a drink. Someone drove you there. Someone smells it. It's
Right.
when you. I don't.
So-
It's differentiated between it's just consuming alcohol would be if you're on duty, but after school activities maybe at a limit, right?
But again, how
Should
do
be
you,
no
how do you choose
Pandora's
the
box.
Yeah,
terms?
that's right, that's right.
Is
I
it
don't know if that's good.
fair to ask Stacy to look into like how others have navigated this? Doesn't this sound like a fun project,
Well,
Stacy?
And to me, I'm not sure if we don't need some legal counsel on this because the very first thing says for option one, we receive federal funds. And so I don't know what restrictions are that they have over this. I'm not sure the legality of us including or not including it. I don't know, and I'm not sure I'm in the.
I don't think there's an absolute bar on the presence of alcohol on
No.
fairly funded school. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and that's something I don't know. So
we can double check that. But,
I feel like this would be easy to violate. Just accidentally you're pre-gaming. Not
We expect
actually
our-
pre-gaming, but we're going to state football or pre-game. Just those are the situations I just sort of think about. It's that accidental.
Yeah.
Like
It almost seems though that if this is taken too, because we need it in there, but if it is taken too far, then those people are gonna be recognized. And maybe the people who want a glass of wine, they're probably gonna be normally participating in this activity and not gonna bring attention.
There may be a simple solution to this, but we just haven't seen it yet.
well, I think you got to realize that if you don't say anything, and
Yes.
you have an employee who's guilty of public intoxication, and it can be established that in fact happened, then I would think that would be a permissible basis for discipline, whether you have an alcohol abuse policy or not.
I see,
So-
yeah. So therefore, we wouldn't need it to be addressed in policy because it's already covered
Well,
by
I think
public
Stacey raises a good
intoxication.
point. Let's just see what the federal act says, because we don't want to jeopardize unnecessarily on something like this.
Okay.
I can look at this. Just get back to you.
Okay, so it sounds like you'll look at that, Ron, and get back to Stacy, and then we'll possibly move on to second reading and have another discussion about what's found at that time.
There will be some other answers that have been received.
And anyone else should reach out to Stacy also, as Ron suggested. It's good if you have come up with your own terminology or feel like there's a suggestion. Okay, there's a motion on the table by Zaleski and a second by Stevens to move policy 1422.01 to a second reading. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. Next is policy 7.02. I'm sorry, next is policy review 7.02, policy 4362.01, threatening and or intimidating behavior towards staff members. This is a first read.
I'd like to move that we move policy 4362.01, threatening and or intimidating behavior towards staff members to second reading.
Second.
And then a motion by member Stoltz, a second by member Zaleski. Questions or comments?
I think I mean, it's more of a comment, not necessarily a question, but I was reading the other policies because I think it says, you know, it could be based on the anti-harassment policy or non-discrimination on the basis of sex and education programs or activities. And I guess who makes that decision? It's probably a question for you, Stacey. Someone violates threatening or intimidating behavior. I mean, that's a policy in itself. It's got consequences. When would it lead into? I mean, it's like, do you automatically, you know, it goes into like protected class, and it could go, you know, flow to a different policy, or it just seems like it's, you know, it flows to other things, and I feel like this policy has sort of punishment attached to it if you violate it. So then why would you need to address it under another policy?
The other policies actually have kind of some steps for investigating and for, you know, what do we follow and who's in charge of doing that investigation. That's what those policies do.
Okay.
I've got a question in regards to the green. Obviously the pink/red is something that was struck. But what's the intentionality with what's the green for?
The green was what was added by Neola after the legislative session. So this policy we already have, that it's revised after.
So the green is the revision.
What is added, and the pink is what was taken away before it got to us. So I didn't make those revisions.
It was just an update.
Correct. The only revisions I make are when it gives you options, or there is kind of a parentheses, and you can put an X in there, or you can strike through it. When it tells you our options, that's when we on our committee, or not our committee, but our working group, that's what we looked at.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Again, Mr. Mott, just for further clarity, from a transparency standpoint, this format could be cleaner if you removed those things that Neola had struck from policy.
Yeah.
Correct. But again, just
Just
show
shows
this was
shown
shown.
the history of it.
yeah, steps.
No, I appreciate that. I just didn't know the code. I guess I didn't see the, little key at the top.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, there's a motion on the table by Stoltz, a second by Zaleski to move this policy on to second reading. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Vote passes 7-0. Our next policy to look at would be policy 5136, the personal communication devices. And this is at first reading. Well, I'll start by saying it's very wordy, even though a lot of words have been taken out. And my suggestion, and it kind of reads in a circle, and I'm confused sometimes by what it's saying, even though I've read it multiple times. And when I found a policy, I was looking online today at different ones, and there's one in Bloomington that I really like. I mean, it's like a paragraph, and it kind of says it. So I feel like we need to condense some words and summarize more. As far as whether, my opinion is whether, the schools have use of it during lunch or passing periods, I defer back to the administrators and teachers and what they feel like is best. Because I used to be a teacher, so my opinion, would maybe different. I mean, I'm not in the classroom anymore, so I want to know what they would like, whether they would prefer it be, hard set on not any use at all, or I don't want to dictate that. I guess I want to hear what they say. So that's kind of where I am on this policy.
I saw Kristen's example policy. I have not had a problem with that policy. This policy has so many problems. There's no way I could support it. I mean, from overreach on student rights to being unclear to giving no flexibility to schools. It's a mess.
We do know, just to remind the public, that because of Senate Bill 185, we do have to have a cell phone policy that removes it from in-classroom use. And I think what we're discussing, because that's kind of legality, we have to do that. That's not an option. Just so the public is aware that it's whether it's allowed in passing periods. I guess to talk further, do we agree that elementary school, or are we just talking about the high school, or how does the board feel about elementary students having it during lunch or passing periods?
I personally thought, I mean, John brought this up in one format, just the building level decisions. I mean, if we have a general policy that says this, we're in compliance with the state laws, this is what our policy is, but then let each of the building level leaders determine what they're wanting to do for their building, I think that makes the most sense and would be the most consistent with what we've been trying to move towards in general. I mean, have you not been saying that again and again? Building level leaders are empowered, and therefore we're gonna let you decide. So I mean,
No, I agree with that. I think I did ask my high schooler, what happens if someone, because last year I think they were supposed to not have them out. And he told me, he's seen kids get them taken away, but I think high school teachers, they either have a designated space usually, or if they say, bring it up to my desk. And then he said he's seen kids get sent down to the office. I made sure he was not one of them, but I mean, I agree with that. It's hard. I mean, Mr. Jones is here. Yeah, elementary, probably not that big of a deal. I mean, my middle schooler, he's a boy, so it's different. He doesn't even I have to remind him sometimes to throw his phone in his backpack, just depending on what's going on that day. But I know I saw this Brazil posted something like reminder Tess has been away for the day, school, which I thought was great. So I just was supportive of that. I do think, especially the, as you call it, the snitch clause, that just scares me because kids are kids and they might think it's funny to kind of try to tell on someone, or maybe
What about
they'll,
validation? I mean,
yeah,
do tell somebody.
yes,
That's
so I don't
bigger.
I don't ever want it to be like you're required to tell on someone. Kids will take advantage of that. So, and then I was worried about fully confiscating, but I think that would be up to the building principals, right? Like that is something that they feel comfortable doing. I think that's probably more of a issue at the high school. Maybe Dennis, just some combative. If they are trying to take the phone, that scares me, but I would want to hear from the principals on what they feel comfortable with in that arena. So.
Other questions, comments about this policy as written?
I'm just curious to know from a formality standpoint. So moving it to second reading then allows you all to truncate the policy as correct? Or
Yes.
I believe it does.
Yeah, just at the second reading in which you all can then look at the policy and
Just
select.
when you're in favor of it going to second doesn't mean we're in favor of how it is. It just means we're moving it on to further deeper discussion,
Exactly.
contacting Stacy, maybe I'll send you one. you know.
Which one?
Yes.
You seen that?
I didn't, showed it to John about an hour ago.
Okay,
When
I
he
was gonna
first
say,
came,
can you send that, and I would like to, you know, I don't know if we get to the point if we wanna socialize it with the principals, just as a, if that's something we would do or not, or if we've just sort of been in agreement and give them the freedom.
I think if you build flexibility in, then you solve that problem. Unless they say, oh, I'd rather just be told what to do, and which is, might be preferenced by some, but to me, it's just, and we've had one shooting. I mean, the thought of kids not having access to a phone if there's an incident is, it's just, I mean, I think I would rather us give support to teachers and how they can better address the problem of phones in classrooms. Can they, you know, their techniques and tools and management philosophy where they can incorporate sometimes, or they're, you know, at the high school, they've had the, you know, 10-point extra credit points if you put it in the drawer. I mean, I think we could better manage the system through some additional tools and techniques rather than prohibition. And because I think in society, I mean, you use your phone all the time. I go to a conference, I snap shots of the screen. I mean, it's just part of how we, especially at the older grades, it's just part of life, whether you like it or not. And I think responsible teaching of that gets us a lot further along than just saying, put it away, because Johnny won't listen to my class because he's got his phone out. Well, maybe that teacher needs some different tools to work with Johnny, that they can now say, okay, you know, we can use our phones. We're going to use our phones on Friday for I got a special lesson. We'll have them out that day, because I think the law says teachers can say they're used. So that's part of the instruction. And if some kid doesn't have a phone, there's all kinds of issues with that. But I mean, there's got to be a better way than prohibition.
I mean, I even brought up the subject with my son about, I remind, first day of school, I'm like, I just want you to be really mindful, right? To keep your phone, which I think he does a pretty good job. And he said, well, I don't have a calculator. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll buy you a calculator. And I was like, what? Like, there's no way he's carrying around calculators. I'll just figure it out on my computer, which I thought was sort of hilarious. But, you know, just those little things. But something I thought of today, because we were getting a bunch of bus notifications, is if the after school buses were going to be changing, right? There's no way I could tell my kids which bus to get on, right? Because they were subbing out buses today and like splitting in the morning. I don't think you guys had, maybe you have to do that after school. I don't know if that happened just in the morning today, but you know, we were getting notifications like this bus needs to, we're splitting this, we're going here. If they're really banned,
I think the school, as a teacher anyway, I got notices, like I got a note sent down or something. Hey, Johnny, your bus has changed today, or when I walk them out.
the younger kids, yes. High school,
They don't. Okay.
My thought is, as we move this, if we in fact we do move it to second reading and then get clarification and cleaning it up, whether it be through that or whatever, I would just throw this out there, just a thought, doesn't need response, but if we did leave it at the building level, and one building chooses to do it this way, one building director chooses to do it that way, are we opening up a different type of battle, you know, school against school, because, well, my children go here and they can't do it there, but their children go there and they have the option and the freedom a little bit more. I didn't want that. That's not the, it's just something to think about.
It's a good point, Karen.
Is that a good thing or a bad choice? I mean, I don't think phones in the classroom is acceptable, then maybe I choose a school, but they're away for the day. But if I think my kid's responsible enough, they can go to elementary and they can have a phone.
We don't have school choice.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not you, but I think
I'm not disagreeing.
There's multiple ways to look at that.
It's just that that's one of those things that somebody out there is going to take consideration of why are they doing it at that school this way, but they're doing it at my child's school a different way. And it seems more restrictive at my child's school than over there. And again, that's just something to put out there for
I mean,
consideration.
wait for the day would make me reconsider that table. I mean, that to me, as a parent, I have other choices. And I think we have to look at that. I mean, are we going to lose?
And to your point,
And
wait for the
kids.
day, to me, as a parent, is like, sweet. They don't, I mean, those teachers aren't
So,
competing for my kids' attention. But yeah,
And we could pass, leave it up to the principal and the principal of the high school and every principal say, wait for the day.
Yeah.
So,
they could decide.
right.
What is the feedback that building principals have given? Because I don't think I've heard that.
Majority of building principals support away from the day. We have one particular principal that prefer otherwise. And I recently met that principal, and I have that respect and appreciate respect for the majority of the principals. That's something that our central office leadership, corporate wide leadership, team discussed last spring and arrived at that conclusion. That would be like today. The challenge, I think, with providing autonomy to each principal. No, yeah. I respect and appreciate it. But if that can therefore undermine our central office leadership, and the decision that we may arrive at for the entire corporation, whether it be cell phones or whether it be other matters found within the student code of conduct. But like I said, whatever the will of the board is, we'll support and put in motion.
But what I'm hearing you say is that the administration, the majority of the principals is away for the day.
With the most recent reports and conversations that we've had with building up leaders, we're away for the day. The practice, parents have appreciated this. This is the reports that I received from those principals. Parents have received, not all parents have appreciated, but to Mr. Stoll's point, I know that it's allowed folks to stay on teaching and learning.
Well, and it sounds like the majority of the board like the idea of building level leaders making that decision. So if that's what they want to do,
I think, I think I'm supportive of a way for the day. It's just those little caveats that's what I want the building leader. Whether it's passing period, whether it's lunch, the boys soccer team today had a scrimmage and it was chaotic because they were like, be there at 3:30 and the boys were like, we're at school still at 3:30. And so there are things like that. And the coach, we're on the Sports U app, is like, get down here. As soon as school's over, get down. You need to hop on the bus, right? If phones are away, even on school property, how do you communicate that to high school kids, right? Like, how do you?
I'm sorry, can you give me that example one more time?
So today the high school boys, they were supposed to, they went to Union County.
Okay.
So they were supposed to be leaving at 3:30, right? And there was some chaos with things going on. So on the app that we use, that parents are on also, it's like, as soon as school's done, you rush down to Tarrant Center, you get on the bus. The bus was 20 minutes later than they thought, but still, like, if phones are away, there's no communication. So at a certain level, I just see, like, at the high school level, you don't have classroom teachers, or you don't have those maybe announcements at the end of the day saying, hey, boys soccer team, you guys now need to meet here, right? So it's just that communication. So as a parent, for me, those are the things I think of. I realize it opens Pandora's box for the other issues. So that's what I'm kind of.
I haven't. I'd have to speak with some of our building level leaders. I know that as a school principal, we always had end of the day announcements for athletics coach, varsity athletics coach. My ball players understood the new. You had 5 minutes at that last bet. In the locker room,
right?
To practice game, so curious to know if there are protocols to help alleviate such challenges.
Yeah.
To your point, yes, the devices do make it that much more convenient.
And it's a much different world too. Like,
Yeah.
coordinating food today. There was no, we weren't sure what that looked like after school. And then there was confusion from the boys' part. Like, okay, again, to her point, school's out at 3:30. Bus is supposed to leave at 3:30. Game doesn't start till 7. So how's that make sense? Like, how am I going to eat? Okay, well, I have to food. Well, that changed midday. So we were able to let let the boys know, just it's those little
It's a
subtle little
completely
things
different world, right?
Yeah.
We knew as kids, right? We didn't communicate. You knew where to go. You knew where to be. You knew what time to be home. You should see some of these text messages. Like when they're like, be at the bus at 3:30, and they're like, we don't get out till 3. It's like, you know what that means, right? Like that is a real world example of like, you shouldn't have to go through these extra steps as parents or teachers or administrators, but
Well, if we do a simplified version, if we do a super basic, we're following the law, you guys implement it as you see fit. Is that kind of what people are?
I think that because it goes back to your point earlier. I talked about letting building level leaders lead their building. That's a prime example.
and I'm gonna fully support. I think as a board we would. If they want it locked down more, we could make the decision to lock it down more. Right? Like if that came up.
Well, I would offer, are we going to ask our faculty and staff to do the same? I mean, if they're a distraction for students, it's a distraction for an administrator and a faculty or a staff. I mean, are we just going to limit phones from all buildings? Because I really don't think it's fair that a teacher can have her phone right here. No, my daughter, she's got Snapchatted me. And then some students then sitting there saying, huh.
But what is that modeling is part of
So,
that line of
and
thought?
I don't think it's right I think we have to learn to live with it. And yes, Senator Roth has provided us this fine legislation that we have to find a way to live with. But if we're going to model behavior and we're going to have what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
And then do we stop at phones? What about watches that are, you can easily communicate, text from, do whatever. So
smart headphones.
I mean, we talked about this kind of blend into the social media policy also between students and staff. I think Karen, you were there at that point too, where, operation guys, they have their phones, right? They have like groups on Facebook, like that's how they communicate. It's for work, but it's the whole thing of if someone sees a staff member on Facebook, but you're telling other people not to be on social media, I don't know how you.
Well, to me, like, I think children, students understand there's a difference. Like they can see an adult drinking alcohol, and that doesn't mean that they can. Like there's certain rules when you're at I do agree with. I mean, modeling is important, but I don't feel like staff members are part of this. And I think it's okay to differentiate between. I mean, I know staff as a teacher, I had a social media page.
As I say, not as I do.
For well, that all the time in life. I mean, I can drive a car, but my 2-year-old can't. I mean, what I mean? There's always those things. But as a teacher, I did use my phone. I had a social media to snap pictures throughout the day, and I had a Facebook page for parents and I enjoyed doing that. And
Most people do. That's why we use them all day.
Yeah. So, but what I'm saying is, for me, it's okay to not set that same standard because there's a lot of standards that are different from students. And I think we all know that cell phones are a distraction to everyone, but research definitely says it can be a detriment for students and distraction as far as achievement and learning in the classroom. And so to me, I don't feel like whatever we decide has to be for everyone.
I'm just saying, if we take this out, I mean, why would you not? I mean, you just gave a point, but it's like, if we're going to take it away from students because it's so bad.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the teacher, I mean, if she's getting notifications or that's drawing their attention.
If someone is misusing, a teacher, that would be up to the principal who was monitoring or, visiting a classroom saying, oh, I notice this teacher's on social or, on their phone all the time. It doesn't seem to be teaching. That would be it, and it'd be different if, you walk by and a teacher snapping a picture of the kids at the reading group and then moving on. So that would be dealt with at a different, just for me personally.
And that process, half dozen notifications during this meeting. Is able to deal with them and still stay engaged.
You missed a whole thing, John.
Mr. Weber does bring up a very valid point. I know as a school principal myself, within our faculty handbook, and I know that Mr. Miles is searching our current faculty handbook, but it was understood that our faculty and staff, teachers, were to also adhere to a level of
That would include administrators. I mean, if we're going to put it on the buildings, you guys need to do it too. I mean,
That means no answering notifications, then during the school board meeting, it goes up, right?
Well, again, I keep
that's our norm.
saying this, but I think that needs to be a building level leadership decision. Whatever they
So-
land on, but at least they know.
If we move it to second reading,
Is that a motion
then
by you?
I think the motion is on the floor.
Oh, it hasn't
There,
been
now
read.
there's never
Been a motion.
No, there's never been a motion.
Yeah.
I still
Okay.
that's right. Discussion
Yeah,
discussion started before
Aaron,
motion
go
came.
on.
So I, yeah, so
Yes.
maybe if someone could give a motion a second, we'll continue the discussion.
So moved.
Thank you.
Move to second reading.
Second.
A motion by Zaleski, second by Stoll. Questions or comments further?
My thing is just simply with all the concerns that you've got that you're going to forward to us, a model from another corporation. We can look at it. Mr. Moss can look at it. We can tweak it between now and then and see where it fits, and we can also forward any other concerns and questions that we have.
Mr. Brunt, if I might respectfully remind the board too, that this is policy. It's intended to be generally directive, but not down to the devilish details. The burden is on the administration then to come forth with administrative guidelines to implement the policy in a manner that was consistent with the general consensus of the board. So I think you're kind of getting into the second phase without really focusing on the generality you want and the flexibility you want to give the administration to meet with day-to-day situations. Give them that general direction.
You read the policy.
I share some of John's concerns, but I mean,
So is our
It's not very
our
general.
direction, it seems to
Policy's
be
not very
that
general.
the consensus is we want it shortened down and we want to give the leeway to the building principals.
But to Attorney Cross's point, as far as giving that, by providing the autonomy for building level leaders to arrive at a decision, then at that point, it's bypassing the central office in our,
Yes.
our administrative team to then therefore have,
You've spoken to us on how those are the feet on the ground. Those are the ones that need to be making the decisions. You want to empower them to make decisions. And this is just the board saying, yes, we agree with this policy and moving that direction.
and I agree with what Mr. Leslie just referenced, and we have empowered our principals. I think that what Attorney Cross is saying is it could potentially establish a particular precedent for things beyond cell phones when it comes to the board arriving at a decision that then have the autonomy or even teachers.
I mean, I think what you're facing, you might as well call a spade, is you're facing legislation to fix a problem that it assumed existed, but when you get down into the classroom, it may or may not exist in the form and to the extent that the legislation presupposed, and that's unfortunate because you're dealing with lousy laws that you have to live with.
To Mr. Levin's point.
Okay. So we have a motion by Zaleski and a second by Stoltz to move to second reading. Are there any other questions or comments? Other than it sounds like that we need to send further questions or comments or suggestions to Stacy, Mr. Mops.
I would prefer it stay on first reading, we vote against this, and that we all see the policy Kristen can provide, and that at our next meeting, we decided we want to move that forward. I think this policy is so fraught with errors and problems, I would rather not even see it move forward. That's my opinion.
I mean, it's
I
kind
agree.
of true.
And I will tell you from examination of some of the policies that we have that'll be coming, there are some that aren't fit to be presented on first reading. And Stacy and I are working on one right now on contracting. You know, it's just crazy. I'm not a Neola fan of it, having in the past, but I think when they react to what they perceive to be a state legislative mandate, then they may or may not capture what was intended. I don't know what was intended.
I mean, and no, you guys haven't had the, I mean, Kristen's, I mean, to me, it meant the spirit of the law in simple language and provided flexibility, but also clear direction, which is what we want policy to do. Also not being prescriptive.
Well, right now we have a motion and a second. And for me personally, I feel like just moving on to second reading just means that we've had some sort of discussion and we aren't agreeing, but it's just moving on. And then maybe this is a good timeline for us to say, oh, look how many readings we had of this one to work it through. I don't know. For me, I'm fine moving it on to second, knowing I'm not happy with how it is and we're gonna adjust. But right now we have a motion, so we can vote and see how that goes and then move on from there. Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. It is, I mean, yeah, we're not liking this, you know, but I guess I kind of feel like establishing the timeline does at least make it feel like we've accomplished something. So I'm of the opinion of moving this to second reading, even if we completely revamp it and use that or something else. Unless, yeah, is there any reason why shouldn't we? I guess convince me otherwise.
I've seen many things slip through this board, and this is what I'm not going to slip through. And I'm not saying this would, but I've seen a lot of things in 8 years. And
But second reading doesn't put it
but
in the books.
It doesn't get it changed either.
Right. That's where I'm at. If we're going to scrap, I mean, to your point you just made, if you're going to scrap most of it, why send it?
So am I correct, then the next board meeting it'll come back looking the same, correct?
If you
It'll still
say
be.
whatever they bring forward.
Well, it'd be whatever Stacy
If we scrap it,
Puts
they bring forward a new one,
on-
right?
board docs for us. Am I right? I mean,
So
because I'm assuming you've been listening to.
I have been, and I don't know where you are.
Yeah.
No, and I don't know where you are. So I've been told, you know, this is really the board's action. I mean, the board really needs to give me some direction because I would feel like I've gotten that direction. I know you don't like this policy, and that's fine. So I just need, I think, clear. But you want to bring, and you know, if somebody wants to suggest something from the board, then I can bring that. And
I think we're all saying
That would
don't
be
like
clear.
the current one.
okay,
Can you just stay on first reading?
We just do like possibly a pared down version, you know, possibly.
It sounds like
It's
No,
Yeah.
I understand.
I think this is part of, you know, the process of us working through policies. Just, I mean, imagine this just being a couple board members, how Aaron and Kim work, but now this is just the larger group. So when you guys did this process, what would you have done at this point?
I don't know, we agreed on everything.
We were
Or actually, I take that back.
I feel like we are agreeing.
Yes,
No,
actually,
yeah. No, there
we're-
were a couple things I think we were like, okay, we need to take this to the full board.
And then did you write words and give to Stacy, or were there any?
We
Okay.
changed them as we discussed them.
Yes.
But there's
Okay.
nothing like this that's a total revamp. This is kind of completely different because,
It's
you know.
more people, more conversation. Sure.
Right, and you see some of the policies, it's literally you're just checking boxes and choosing two options. This is so much for other things, so. I mean, but
Every other board in the state has had to follow this and create policy because the new law is having the same discussion at same length and everything.
Sounds like one got to the paragraph, and we're at 4 pages. I mean,
Well,
I think we got it.
This covers everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it does. It just, there's obviously better options out there.
So maybe it would work if I sent this out to the board and we, you know, change it up or add things to it, give suggestions, then it'd be sent to Stacy and then it could come back. Then we can talk with Dr. Wright too about how it connects them.
Sounds good.
Okay. So right now, we still need to vote. We have a motion and a second to take this to second reading. So all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
I
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Vote fails 5-2. Do I need another motion?
Keep that for sure.
Yeah.
Or first,
Well-
What was the agenda first reading?
The agenda, maybe.
Ron, do we need to make a motion if nothing, if it fails and this just would stay?
It's not been passed under, it's a second reading, and so you can't have second reading on the same night you have first reading, you didn't pass it. So it's just, it's still hanging out there.
Okay.
It's just tabled.
Well, it's not,
It's
you haven't
still
taken
first
action.
reading.
So
It's
what
just
we
a
have
first
to,
read. Okay.
what we have to do then is, and I mean, you can make it in the form of a motion.
No, the agenda committee just puts it on the agenda. It doesn't need to be anything else. That's how policies end up.
It's still an issue.
Yeah.
So it's still first reading, so we can move on. And
Yeah.
Aaron, were you gonna add
So I was
something?
just gonna say,
Robert rule, I know it needs to be formalized, but it doesn't really.
Here, no, here.
Tell and Cole, busting together for there.
I was just gonna say, it doesn't really require the motion, but, we've got the opportunity now to find some more ideal models out there to give to him, to present to us for a first reading of a policy that we can agree on.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on then to preview of upcoming meetings and events. The next work session is going to be Wednesday, August 28th at 5:30, and the business meeting at 6:30. I don't know if this, yeah, it's just gonna be that. Any other? Next would be highlights and discussions. I have a few items. The first was that I was able to, along with board member Stoltz, attend the back to school welcome celebration at Civic Hall. I don't think we've had a meeting since then. It was pretty exciting. See all the teachers and staff there with Mr. Tom Burt, who was a former Ohio superintendent. And a few notes that I wrote down that he kind of highlighted were to set very high expectations for students, which I think we would all agree with. And words don't mean anything without behavior. I really like that. Just a reminder of that. Words are important. The words matter, but the behavior and what happens from those is also important.
And how fun was it to see our all of our teachers and staff standing up, singing, "Lean on Me," throughout the. I mean, that was just really fun just to see the camaraderie. So I appreciated that.
Afterward, we were able to talk to representatives from Grand Canyon University, the teacher college. Mr. Mobbs that you work with that helps our students, our staff get certified. And they were very informative about the programs that they have for professional development for teachers who want to get certified, for undergraduate and graduate programs for teachers. And they offer a discount when there's a certain number of teachers. So I thought that was a great opportunity. And they were able to tell us about a handful of people who are going through that program now to get certified through Mr. Mops and the program that's available. So that was fantastic to hear from them. So thank you, Mr. Mops. I also wanted to mention that we were going to have a conversation about DEI. I know it's the end of the evening, but I felt like this should be a conversation that we should have public forum. I met with some representatives this week, and I know Mr. Cross did as well, so I'm going to let Mr. Cross begin. Then I'm happy to share about my experience and we can share our thoughts on that.
Preface my experience with a little background. I was given the initial draft by Dr. Wright to examine, and after a couple of hours of looking at it, and I might have had a football game on or something, I don't know, but it was very frustrating. So I finally just started highlighting things I found problematic, and ended up I basically colored 2 pages or 3 pages. I didn't touch the definitions. I thought a couple of them were actually fairly decent. So I'd given that to him, and I think you shared some of it with the REA's coalition.
Yes, sir.
So that precipitated a request on their part to speak with me. So I said, well, they're urging Dr. Wright. I said yes, and we had a meeting that I attended by Zoom last week, Thursday, was it?
So just running together.
Yeah, it's been a while. So I was there not really knowing what to expect, but I did try to prepare at least something to give them a more of a structure. So I started out with making it very clear that I didn't speak for the board. And in fact, I talked about the roles of the stakeholders. I started out with the public, and I said, I see the role of the public is to cultivate relationships within their schools at the building level, with administrative staff, and even with school board members to facilitate avenues of communication so that you have. I think if you hear from someone enough, you're going to at least listen to them, whether you how you weight those discussions and communications. It's not entirely up to you. It's a function of the quality of the communication. But the board, its role is to listen to stakeholder communication, give appropriate consideration in its development of policies. The administration assists the board in policy development with insights as to the practical implications of a policy, and also develop administrative guidelines that provide direction and procedures for implementation, because the policy written and put in a policy manual and stay in there does nothing to impact kids in their education. So that was basically the three players. And then me, I say I assist in answering questions at all stages, but fundamentally, an attorney will advise the board or administration within the context that's being presented what it can or cannot do according to legal parameters. Never should an attorney tell the board what it ought to do. So with that preface, I think we've kind of diffused some of the issues. So they wondered what I found problematic or what I found illegal, I think was the actual question about their first draft. And I told them not, there's nothing I could say that when you look at a statute, when you look at a document, and you want to legally analyze it, there are two overviews to take. One is facially problematic. If I couldn't see anything there that was facially illegal, now problematic, that's a different. When we start talking about employing people with certain ideas and philosophies, that's a red flag for me. I think we need to make that employment process as objective as we possibly can, and I expressed that to you. I gave them a cleaned up, if you will, and when I say cleaned up, I mean more legally cleaned up. I used names and definitions. Richmond Community Schools was Richmond Community Schools. I never used district capitalized. That's not what you do. It's RCS. Board of School Trustees is the board. Anyway, I gave them a relatively cleaner copy of that. And at the end of the day, I think they realized they had to do some thinking. I think the general rules I gave them for a policy to be effective, there has to be a level of buy-in with the stakeholders who are going to be implicated. So what does that mean? That's clearly define your terms, and those most critical terms and the areas in which the policy focuses. 2, avoid conclusory statements unless and until there's credible data on which those conclusions can be supported. 3, avoid overly broad, generalized, or seemingly blame-casting statements and may be interpreted as opinion rather than fact, even if they could be factually supported. There were several zingers in that first edition, if you will, first iteration. I'm not sure that we have a fundamental expectation that our faculty and our administration will not reflect the demographics of the school corporation. And yet that was the assumption that was being articulated in the first draft. So with that being said, we talked about a few things that were problematic in general sense, not really terribly specific. And then this one was the one I think I kind of got them thinking a little bit. I said, recognize potentially adverse interests that could impair acceptance and buy-in to the policy you're creating. And that, that's a practicality that someone who's developing a policy that's going to have buy-in has to consider. And in this instance, you've been there. You've heard public comment come from people that are not supportive of their perception of what a D&I policy would be. And again, we're dealing with perception, and I'm not sure perception is always reality at this stage because we're in the formative stage. We're not at the end of the process. So So with that being said, we went for about an hour, and thankfully Dr. Wright had a hard stop. So we concluded at that point, and I wished them well and told them if they had questions, I'd be glad to entertain them. But I also encouraged them to contact, since they are an REA initiative, the attorney for the ISTA, Eric Hilton, and is very competent in all areas, and he's a resource. So I suggested that I didn't have his phone number; I'd have given it to him. But that's the way it ended. I think overall it was. I hope it was thought provoking, and I think it was. I won't say I wouldn't describe normative result, positive or negative. I just think at this stage of the process, provoking thought is about as much as any of us can ask for.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you for meeting with them and thank you for your insight. I met with Trey Ronnie and Erica Pearson. They're with the Racial Equity Coalition. I know several of us over the last several years have met from different members from that coalition. It was a very good meeting. They're very good people who care about students. I need to say that. They really care about students. So I started the meeting, or they asked me to meet, and I started by saying I only speak for myself. And so what I'm going to share now, and I hope you all will share your stance as well, is where I stand with the DEI policy, what I shared with them. I also read the original policy, not the original, I guess the revised policy that they, and my notes were similar words to what you said. Some of them, very broad statements. Some of this is vague, and I shared that with them. But I also shared that at this time that I'm not in favor of adopting a DEI policy. I'm in favor of some of the terminology they use being incorporated into current discrimination policies, harassment policies that we have. Particularly, I gave them some statements in their policy that I agreed with. The Board of Education is committed to creating and maintaining a positive and inclusive learning environment where all students feel safe, included, welcome, valued, and experience a sense of belonging and academic success. There were 5, I think, different statements that I thought we may already have in our policy, but that I would agree with, particularly where it includes all students. So that's kind of where I am, and I shared kind of how I felt about the policy presented, or how I feel about that. I also shared about, I had gone to training that they offered several years ago on microaggressions and diversity, and I thought that was very helpful. I learned a lot at that. I recommended that they invest more money in educating the community, more of our staff on just some of those needs. I think it was very helpful for me. I talked to others who felt it was helpful. And that was very powerful for me. So I felt like that was important. So I'm not in favor of a DEI policy. I am in favor of using some of their proposed language that's very general, that includes all students and how we want all students to succeed and possibly incorporating. So I thought it would be good if we have not had an open discussion, for the public to see or hear how we all feel. So I'm putting it out on the floor for others to share if they would like to. Again, this is just my feelings.
I'll share. I think when I had this, like talking about the microaggression training, I've gotten the opportunity to do a lot of that, and I think it's so valuable for everyone because there are just little things, implicit bias that are helpful for everyone in their daily life. So when I think about when I first met with them, right, it was still when it was, a long policy. And, I've got to work with a lot of consultants too. Like, this is their world, right? It's they're able to maneuver these policies and make it work for different companies. Obviously, education, it's the same, but a little different. So I kind of always, the way I've been looking at this is not necessarily a full policy, but taking, like you said, some of those statements, because I do agree with them, and either making just a shorter, in the spirit of like our mission and vision statement. Like, that's how I see, like, hey, here's this little caveat, this statement, and then addressing the policies we do have, right? And really sort of calling that out, right? We address this here. We not in those terms, but So if you're thinking about, flipping through a handbook, right, you see that, oh, great, like this is what RCS really stands for. Here are all the policies that really address that they already have. To me, that solves a couple different issues. I think the coalition has worked so hard. I give them props because they have, edited and done different iterations, and they have come to the table and I think it's important to take some of what they are bringing and incorporate it in. Does it have to be a huge big policy? No. But I do think it's important to sort of come to some consensus on that. Yeah, you do. It gets in, some trouble sometimes, but I think a lot of it, you have to kind of stay on that, we're how liable, or if the expectation is for us to really offer specific training. I do think REA would be great if we have more options, but not necessarily saying everyone has to, take this training. You don't want to sort of push things on people, however, recommending. So yeah, that's just kind of where I sit. I don't want to like keep dragging it out because I appreciate them so much, right? It's important to a lot of people. It's important to acknowledge the thoughts behind it. Aaron and I kind of have a conversation about DEI being triggering to people and how it's sort of flipped. You don't even necessarily have to call it DEI, right? Like there's different ways to sort of maneuver with this, and it still has the same meaning. It still gets the same point across. I want everyone to welcome it, whatever that is. So, my thoughts.
Others?
We mentioned one thing, and I think Dr. Wright and I were kind of on that, and that is we start our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance, and let's think about what those last 6 words are. With liberty and justice for all. And I think it's important to understand that those are still aspirations for our country and not realizations. And with that being said, I think then that leaves the torch passed to everyone else to try to make it more closer to a realization. But that's going to mean different things to different people.
What were you going to say?
And I'm real similar to where Kim is at, including a cross-reference essentially to policies that we already have. So we're not restating and finding the same thing in 2 different policies. So it's in one place, and it just makes a cross-reference. Maybe we can include some of the definitions, some of those areas where Ron found to be helpful, and then cross-reference that. That's probably.
So basically take the policies that we have and cross-reference what we currently have.
Well, cross-reference what we currently have. I think at one point, Mr. Mops gave us a breakdown of where there's no cross-reference. I'd have to go back in emails. That's been a day or two, or last year or longer.
I provided those to the board some time ago and also spoke to those at Washington Regional Library. That's what I asked for.
So I don't know if we have 3 people who have spoken, but I'm not sure where the rest of the board stands to know whether we need to keep pursuing a policy, or are we saying we would like to adapt and add to ours, or we don't have a majority who's kind of shared, so I'm not sure.
I don't have a problem at all with the DEI policy. I think my preference would be a stripped down, simplistic approach. But hearing Pete and Kim, I mean, we used to have a I don't know where we stand. We used to have a board beliefs statement. And if there are 2 or 3 key points that they agree upon, that we as a board agree upon, we could possibly add those in that board beliefs document. And that would maybe solve be a nice middle. I mean, I think we could agree, I would hope we could get to a point where we could agree upon some statements. But rather than have it on policy, if we had added, like, say, 2 bullet points to our board beliefs, maybe that would be a middle ground.
My thought is if there are valid points within the proposal, that we add those to our existing policies that we have already without creating or adopting a new policy.
I'd be along those lines. I'm not in favor of a DEI policy. So, but if there's valid statements, I feel like even in their policy they sent out, they cross-referenced the list of policies that we've already got. So I was a little perplexed as to the point, honestly, behind it. I think it was kind of talking in circles a little bit, but it sounds like you helped clean it up. So, but yeah, as far as the policy, I'm not in favor.
Some of the things that Ron said that, he said the practical implications of the policy concern him, and that's one of the things that in reading their proposed policy, that's what stood out to me is just practically speaking, how are we implementing this?
Right. That was kind of where I was with concerns too. It's like,
I'm not wanting to open up our school corporation to liability or, how are we, coming down on this or whatever. I do feel like, as Kim was stating, the coalition has done a lot of work. We share the same goal. We want to serve our students. We want to protect our students. We want all of our students to feel loved and honored and cherished. And I think we all want that. So if there's some underlying issues, I want to address those, whether that's with training or with, whatever, or discussions and dialogue. I want to hit that straight on. I don't know that a policy is necessarily the way to go about that. So I'd like to continue the dialogue on what can we do if we're not doing what we feel like we should be doing as a corporation. What's the problem? What do we need to be doing? Personally, I feel like we are trying to love on our students, students of all races, of all colors, of all identities. But again, if others aren't feeling that way, let's talk. Let's see what we can be doing differently. So that's where I am.
Yeah, and I will say too, I think I mentioned maybe you and I, conversing. I almost read it from the standpoint initially, like there was an action that happened that spurred the need for this. Hopefully that's not the case, but I don't recall hearing of anything. But again, I just no disrespect to the work that they put in, but I feel like we're just creating something to create it out there. So it was very wordy and kind of running in circles. I was a little confused, but
And
not
also,
that there's not valid statements.
some of the statements we could implement,
100%.
like maybe we look at, John, you suggested maybe a couple things, pulling it out. You said that too. Yeah, if there's stuff that needs to be implemented in our current policies, let's get it in there.
So I'm thinking that maybe if we each can look at their proposal, their last one, and then kind of decide, maybe share the future of what statements we feel like and start working with that as a group. There are some statements we all collectively can agree upon. Okay. Other discussions.
I just wanted to bring up something. It's about transportation, but I just want to, as a parent, obviously there's issues every year. last year, parent director right now. I struggled a lot with busing issues, transportation, living on the east side of town. You know, there's Hibbard transfers. I believe we got staffed, which is fantastic. The bus drive worked really well. I do see, and this is, my perspective, but seeing some other parents, especially, and talking to them back to school night, there was a very high level of frustration. I think at some level, I don't know where the breakdown is. This isn't necessarily directed at you two, so I don't want you to think that at all. I think, or I feel more that there might be times where people say, oh, busing's fine, right? Like you guys might hear that narrative. And then there's a lot of parents that are like, busing is not fine, like it's not okay, like I'm not getting the answers. And then parents give up and they stop trying, or they don't put their kid on the bus. So, and then, on the flip side, back to school night, I was trying to get information about bus routes. At one point I couldn't figure out the Charles bus. Well, they got moved to another small bus, which by the way is a great idea because we live kind of on the outskirts. And it saves gas, it saves time, smaller bus. But the person there couldn't figure it out because it was like on a sheet over here. Hibbard, no one kind of knew. Like none of the transfer information was readily available at Hibbard. And then there was no that I saw transportation person at the high school. So, which sometimes I get, some of the transportation people, no one was angry, they were trying. A couple said, this is all I have to work with. So, there's just another level of breakdown of maybe they weren't really given the tools to communicate to parents or they were confused. I'm not sure, but it just was creating mass chaos. The other point of that is, yes, there were lots of issues. So it's probably saw on Facebook about, kids on buses for a long time the first day. I know things happen. I know we're trying to work through. But I really, really would like us to post bus routes and bus schedules because you see comments like I was trying to call before school started just to find out, right? So if you think, parents can't get through to the bus garage, especially that first week, but how many of those people just needed a bus number, right? And it's still not posted. There's no information. So I'm sitting here as a parent of 4 kids, like, I don't know, bus numbers. I don't know. Karen did call me. Thank you. But it's still, we're making it worse for ourselves, sort of. So, Kristen and I talked about there's a certain level of security posting like full bus routes or where the pickup and drop off are. But I just sort of challenge us to kind of create a system. And, we were talking, my last district, it was sort of coded, right? So whether it's on Parent Square or their schedule, we put locker combinations. Give them a bus number or give them something. And then there's something that we post that they can cross reference. Something like that, because, I did get my middle schooler on a morning bus today. I had to call the bus garage again to figure out that bus. But some little kids, right, it's giving them, I can't say, go to test. You're going to take a bus to test. Get off, just look for the Hibbard bus. As a parent, that's not okay for me to say that or put him through that, right? Like, what's the bus number? What time? We don't know any times, right? I'm guessing right now that one of my bus drops off at 2:53, right? I didn't know that first yet. So having little kids, you have to be at the bus stop. So I literally go down there at 2:30 or 2:40 and just sit and wait because we don't have anything posted. So it's really hard, and I don't want to take away from anyone's hard work. on trying to figure this out. I know it's a logistic nightmare, but I do think if somehow I don't think that is flowing all the way through, whether you guys might think that something's being communicated and it's not, or people over here aren't asking for the information. I don't know what it is, but I just really see us acknowledging that and figuring out how to address it. I do appreciate the notifications on Parent Square. Millions. I'm not going to complain because I would rather see that happen. With the bus groups that seem to be, but that wasn't necessarily right away. There's nothing that says like, oh, hey, we put bus groups in Parent Square. Like, be on the lookout. It wasn't until we got notifications that we really even knew that they were in there. And it still doesn't tell you what time you're supposed to get picked up or dropped off, or even some sort of it's between this and this. So, just trying to imagine as a parent navigating, kids at different schools. The first couple of weeks, especially, you have no clue, and the frustration and the stress that causes. And then I get triggered from other parents that are having the same issues. So I just want to challenge us to come up with a way that we can communicate better about those routes, whatever that looks like. I don't know. But I just think it's really important to, I get it. It's hard to staff. It's hard to maneuver. There's delays. There's wrecks. But and we know that. I think parents just want to hear acknowledgement sometimes when things aren't happening or they can't get the information. It's really the information. It's the communication, right? Like,
I think that's personally, I think it's been better in the last 2 days, especially. So,
yeah.
Today in particular.
We have a really great bus driver. She is awesome. So, like I said, it's not any one thing. It's not any blame. It's just the overall, how do we help ourselves? Because I feel like we sometimes. So,
picking one of the things that you referenced, and I just wanted for clarity, you mentioned sounds like almost like a two-step authentication that you previously had in your previous corporation that you all received as parents, that only you could access particular information. Because to your point, I know that I had heard at one juncture, I think we used to post routes, but I know that that was something that, from a safety and security standpoint, to your point as well, it was a different approach to be visited. What I will say is that one of the things I've asked of our operations team and of transportation is, as we approach this school year, because we have understood, as was mentioned in some correspondence that Bill partook in, we too are monitoring, observing, and assessing, and collecting data along the course. And so every 2 weeks, 5 weeks, we'll be providing email forward with a report as to our findings when it comes to transportation and improving efficiency, effectiveness, and overall communication. So, for that two-step authentication, I'd love to learn more about it. So I want to find out if we can, that's something that we can mimic and create opportunity for parents to be better informed and have resources readily available to them. That makes all the difference in the world. To your point, it provides at least mind to our parents and guardians.
Yeah, it was almost like a Google Doc. And when Bus Boss worked for like a day, you had a code, you knew what your bus number was, and then when you went in, and I know they used Campus, so it was through there, but X marks the spot basically. So I could see other bus stops because I'm a parent with kid on bus, but so it doesn't need to be anything hard or convoluted. I know it takes time. I know it takes energy to do something like that.
Well, but also if I may, I know that our board approved long ago a new software system that is soon to be unveiled, I believe the 15th of this month.
Yeah.
And so I think that too will help alleviate some of the other challenges. But what I hear you also saying is the preparation leading up to day one. So that feedback is something that as we move forward and hopefully with the software as we approach day one next year, it will give us some opportunity to be flexible. But we definitely encourage the feedback from all of our families, and guardians, parents, students alike. We are monitoring the collective data this year to bring back not only to you all, but so that we can assess and arrive at appropriate decisions if necessary.
Great.
Other discussions? Comments? I'd say thank you to Dr. Wright and cabinet here for the great start to the school year. So we appreciate each one of you. It's a lot of work to get things rolling. And thank you.
Teamwork makes the dream work, and I'll just say that of the veteran educators that come across, last year, many of them stated that it seemed to be the best start of the years. This year, some of those same ones were saying this year was even better. And to know that, as I expressed during that book-wide celebration, our motto this year, for the most part, is of those best practices, of those areas we have found success and growth, we need to rinse, repeat, and refine. And so that's the goal for the course year. You get
You added refine. I think you were just saying rinse and repeat.
I was.
I'm just
refine. It's positive. I love it.
Meeting the term.
One usage. Okay.